Welcome to Navigating Life with Vision Loss, an Aftersight original podcast. In each episode, we share stories, insights, and practical advice to help you navigate the journey of living with low vision or blindness. Together, we'll embrace each step with courage, grace, and hope.
Hello, I'm Kim Wardlow, the Executive Director of Aftersight and your host for Navigating Life with Vision Loss. So today we are about halfway, or exactly halfway, 8 episodes into our 16-week series on advocacy. So we've talked about individual advocacy and advocacy at work and advocacy in education and all sorts of things so far. And today we're going to talk about family advocacy and supporting loved ones. And I'm excited for our guest today, Darran Zenger. He actually, he's been on both the Blind Chick and Blind Sight. So if you didn't already listen earlier this year to Bill Lundgren's series on the 12 steps, Darran was part of that. And I would highly encourage you to go back and listen to those if that is applicable for you or someone you know or love. But Darran is a therapist at Cirque Lodge in Utah and has many years of experience in therapy. And Darran, you have Usher, so you not only have work experience as being a therapist, but you have personal experience in terms of advocating in family situations as well. So welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So just for our listeners, we're going to be talking about family advocacy, kind of defining what that is, some of the key elements of advocacy, and then getting some tools and resources that you might be able to access in your own life experience, and how to build a support network as well for yourself. So, Darran, do you want to just tell folks a little bit about yourself?
Like you mentioned, I have Usher Syndrome, and that is comprised of blindness due to retinitis pigmentosa and paired with hearing loss. And so growing up, I wore hearing aids and, had corrective lenses up until, early 20s where my vision couldn't get corrected anymore. And then I got to a point where, 2011 and 2012, I went and got cochlear implants respectively, which actually changed everything for me to a degree that I was able to go back and get my master's and here I am today as a therapist, as you mentioned.
Well, could you just give folks a definition when we're talking about family advocacy and in the context of a family where one or more members are blind or have low vision, how you would define that?
I think, from those terms, one thing that I should probably share is that in my family, I'm not the only one who has deafness and hearing loss. I have a double first cousin who is 4 years younger than me, who also had RP growing up and in her adult years started losing hearing loss as well. So there were 2 of us in our family trying to navigate the family system. It was difficult for me because I'm the youngest of 5 kids and we're spread out. And so my older siblings didn't really understand at that point, what this was like for, a younger brother to lose vision and things like that. And so for me, from a family systems perspective is how do we advocate or educate our family members of what our personal needs are? And that's what I've had to do with my own siblings is, hey, I can't see here. This is what's going on. This is what I need. And being able to voice those things in a family system rather than just try to be, pushed aside
Mm-hmm.
where you're feeling isolated. And even to this day, I come from a large family. My family gets together. They know what our needs are. My cousins will come up and talk to me and say, "Hey, Darran, it's Paul. What's going on?" And so over time, my family got used to both my cousin and I and our vision loss, and being able to meet us where we're at to help us feel uh, included in all our family activities.
Yeah, I think we may not always think about having to advocate for ourselves within our family, but others may not really understand what
Mhm.
is needed or wanted, what might not be needed either.
Right, and the thing of the hard part is because vision loss is so gradual. It's like you function as it is, and all of a sudden you hit this brick wall. It's like, okay, how am I gonna keep doing what I'm doing and say, hey, I need help in this, or I need help navigating this. Especially when I'm with my family navigating outside of, let's say we go to a restaurant or whatever, then say, hey, this is what I need. And one of the things that I've often done is with my kids as an adult, is says, hey, I having problems seeing. Can you come back here to guide me through this maze as we try to work our way through the tables that we need to sit down?
Mm-hmm.
You have to be really comfortable to be able to reach out and ask for help. Some people have a hard time doing that because, we live in such a society where, well, dang, everybody else can do this. Why can't I? And then there seems to be some sort of shame around vision loss or hearing loss that how do we speak up for what I need without feeling like this is a bad thing to be blind.
Right. Many guests have mentioned that, just trying to overcome other people's perceptions of what they
Yeah.
could or couldn't do.
Hmm.
What do you,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
Yeah. One of the things I was thinking of, I found a YouTube that has a very good visual display of what RP is. And I've often given that to not only just family members, but to coworkers and other people I work with, so they can have an actual visual representation of what vision loss is, and then that provides them some depth of understanding of what I might be dealing with at any given time.
Well, I think families may want to be helpful and may want to be supportive and just aren't sure how. What are some of the other common challenges that you see families face, and how advocacy could be of assistance in that?
I think families could be shamed. I mean, I'm just looking back and seeing, especially if you have like parents of blind children, the shame that maybe parents are dealing with because they just don't know how to help their child out like anything else. This is new for them.
Mm-hmm.
And for them to also, advocate for their child, especially in an education system. I'm grateful for my dad who saw a need out in rural education and got involved to make sure that, those that were in rural areas could have equal access to education. I think that was huge to see my dad in that capacity try to influence at a state level to help educate, and advocate for family members who might be struggling to get their child's education needs met. And I think it's okay to go to therapy,
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to the parents of the entire family and the individual who's blind to be able to go to therapy and discuss some of these feelings and challenges that what they do, because so often people, they don't know how to advocate for themselves because they don't know exactly how they're feeling. And so trying to identify what that emotion is can help navigate true vulnerability and access and sharing experiences with everyone.
Just having that outside person to be able to navigate things between family members, I could see where could be really helpful too.
Absolutely. And sometimes, you know, as a blind person, I could be, learning Braille, I could be learning this. And for me, I was able to verbalize with family members, this is what I need to do to be able to watch TV, for example. And a lot of times my family would accommodate for that. And in this case, closed captioning when I could see, pretty good at that time. And that's how I would engage with TV, is be able to see through closed captioning. But with somebody who's blind, that same process is going through. And I do that today with my own kids, is being able to say, hey, I want to sit down and enjoy a movie with you. But in order for me to do this, I need to put audio description on. And so it becomes like this second nature for my kids to watch a movie with dad with audio description on. And sometimes I wonder, they even start watching TV's programs, with audio description. They don't always ask it to be turned off, but they're very willing to recognize that, hey, dad's blind, I can't engage in a movie without audio description, and they recognize the value of audio description in that. And the nice thing is, my wife, when we go out, she knows that this is an important thing. When we go to the movies, she will ask the people at the front desk, or where the ticket booth is, for headphones, so that I can have audio description when I go to the movie theater, which relieves a lot of stress on my part, because it's nice to have somebody with me to be able to advocate for that with me.
Right. I never thought about advocating actually to your children. I mean, I think of that maybe more as education, but that is advocacy too, and helping them to understand and learn and be able to take that experience with them into school or other parts of their lives. They encounter another person who has vision loss,
or vision loss, or any type of disability, for, and help advocate them for their needs as well.
How would you counsel family members that they want to be supportive, but they also recognize that their family member they're trying to help and support also needs to have their own independence? Because I know that's something I've heard too, that people experience, of like, people are so helpful that I'm, they're just wanting to do everything for me, but I'm still an independent person and capable, and for a family member trying to find that balance.
And that's where we go in and be able to advocate. This is what I need. I'm gonna use this example. I mean, this has happened to me a lot of times. I'm either using train with the white cane, and somebody tries to help me down there when I can do it myself. And the same thing with the family, say, hey, I got this. And this willingness to say, hey, I've got this. I can do this piece, and be able to say, hey, I'll let you know when I need help. And an obvious thing would be for me is I'm with family, go into a restaurant, let's say, going to a place where there's a buffet, whatever, then I can be in line with them holding my plate, but asking them, what do they see here? And then just going through the list, and then I can say, hey, I want that. Sometimes I do need other people to dish it up for me. Sometimes I need help and I can do it myself. And being able to identify when you can and when you can't. It's just communication is key here, is what I believe. And if you're not willing to communicate what your specific needs are, then it can be very difficult to navigate. Everybody's going to get frustrated.
Mm-hmm. Well, communication, I think, is one of those key elements in advocacy, of really having that open communication. That can be difficult, especially maybe with sensitive topics. People might be frustrated. Are there strategies or tips you would give folks if they're trying to approach a sensitive topic, but really need to either communicate their need, or they're trying to determine the need of a loved one, and be respectful of what they need and what they don't?
Yeah, and I know, one of my things to be able to advocate for my family is, for me, I can create things visually in my head. And so if I go look to find something and it's not there, and somebody moves it, that creates a lot of increased frustration on my part. And so being able to advocate, hey, I was looking for the box of tissues and it wasn't found where we normally have it. I really need to make sure the box of tissues are in the same place. We don't think about that because, sighted people can easily scan around and identify, the box of tissues got moved over here. But with somebody who's blind, it takes so much work and effort to start feeling around everywhere in the house trying to find that box of tissue. So it's, that key component of communication. And if something gets moved, verbalize that to the blind individuals so they know that it got moved and know where to look for it. Because spatial key layouts is extremely helpful. I hate looking in the fridge because things are moved around all the
time.
Place. Yeah, and it's frustrating. And so, it's not that we're trying to be picky. It's just that makes our lives so much easier to say, hey, let's have all these things in one drawer, or this in one side of the door, like all the sauces, the barbecue, mayonnaise, ketchup, mustard, and be able to identify, okay, they're here. This is where we're going to keep it. So it's easy to find, because and that's one of my pet peeves. If things get moved around too much, then it's like I throw my hands up in the air and it gets very frustrating.
Yeah. Randomly deciding to reorganize is not helpful. If you have somebody that's depending upon that to find what they need. And that just kind of leads me to empathy and respect, some other really essential elements of advocacy. Even just that active listening component in the communication.
Yeah, and that's the reflective listening is to really, and then tying this into empathy. The definition of empathy is to be able to understand at an emotional level what's going on, right? And so being able to put your feet in the blind person's shoes, and be able to understand what their experience might be, and learning to look at things through a different perspective than your own. Because I always tell a lot of people that our reality is based on our perspective, but perhaps our perspective is not accurate, and we need to broaden our perspective. Then we can understand truly what's going on. And so I always say, hey, what does this feel like if this was happening to you? And sometimes that's what that key communication and respect is the ability to take a step back and recognize, hey, this I may not have this problem, but you know what, I can totally see where this is coming from, and to just honor that with that other person. Um, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to agree with it,
Mm-hmm.
but at least honor that person for what they need.
Well, and could you speak to conditions like RP that change? So many things do change over time, and so it's not just okay, I've lost this amount of vision, and or this amount of hearing, and this is what I'm going to need for forever. With conditions that there may be a gradual loss, and it's ever changing and needs change, and communicating those needs where people might think, oh, well, I know what this person needs. I know how to be helpful, and now it's changing, and just to be able to address those types of needs that are changing, and it's not because you're inconsistent or changing your mind. It's just that the condition itself has changed and the needs have changed.
Right. And I think I might want to add in a more technical term here is functional vision, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So we can have two people with RP who have the exact same parameters, less than 5 degrees of visual field, and maybe see 2800 or just fingers at your face, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but how a person functions is their ability to adapt with this. But the key here is a lot of times our brain does a lot of strange things to adapt with us that we don't even know those changes are happening. And the individual with vision loss tend to adapt to it subconsciously without regards. And so
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we're like, oh, I was just remembering a couple months ago, I went into a process group and it just kind of freaked me out a little bit. It's like, wait, this room looks darker than it used to be.
Mm.
And so that's the kind of change that we endure, but sometimes we adapt to it faster than is brought to our awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And so what was once the ability to be able to see and do something, that's going to change, and the individual who is blind or visually impaired, hopefully has that awareness to be able to convey what that is. I think it's super important for family members to recognize vision loss is a huge spectrum, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and society thinks, well, blindness is like, the spectrum of things that we do. And one of the funny things I always tell people when I'm advocating for myself that I need some help or whatever, and they look at me and they say, well, you don't look blind. And I'm like, well, you don't look stupid. and really have some humor with this, because their expectation of a blindness is either you see or you don't,
Right.
and not that in between gray area where there is a little vision that we do try to utilize, and that kind of ties into our independence of what we can and can't do. I will admit, I like to use as much vision as I can when I'm doing stuff, but I've learned to adapt. I can't rely on my vision,
Mm-hmm.
but I can't use other pieces for me, like when I'm cleaning, It's kind of funny. My kid said, Dad, I cleaned this. And I put my hand down and I says, oh, no, it's not. Because I can pick up and feel all those other things. And
Right.
so they've had to learn to adapt to that, I use other senses to accomplish similar tasks without my eyes. And that could be, a difficult thing for family members to realize, Dad can't see, Dad can do this, Dad can't see, Dad can't do that,
Right.
and trying to, and it's confusing because sometimes it's not clear cut. Because some days I'm fine, the other days I'm like, well, wait, this seems off to me. So, you know, again, going back to that communication with your family members.
Yeah, that's so important. I think communication in so many areas of our lives really is such a key factor.
Mhm.
Are there other tools or resources that you would recommend, maybe organizations or technologies that can help families advocate effectively?
I mean, I think a lot of times there's a lot of independence and advocacy out there. There's the National Federation of the Blind, and there's those chapters that are local state chapters. There's the American Council of the Blind. I even like to advocate for Hadley School for the Blind, which,
Hmm.
if I'm not mistaken, the family members of visually impaired people can take some free classes there to learn Braille or other ways to help their family member, and things like that. So, and then each state has their own division of services for blind and visually impaired for the family members, and they often, a lot of times, these organizations, nonprofits, like here in Utah, they have the Utah Council of the Blind. They often have a lot of social activities for the family members. So they get exposure to a wide variety of vision loss and activities for them to get exposed to, so they can see a wide variety of things.
Yeah. Well, and even, the video that you mentioned before that gives a sighted person an idea of what the experience is like if you have an RP. I've seen, whether it's videos or just little
Mhm.
cards that you hold in front of your eyes, the old school types of things. I think I myself have found that helpful to understand what a person may be able to see or not. Obviously, it varies from individual to individual, but it gives a general
Mhm.
sense of, oh, this condition is a loss of peripheral vision, or it's a loss of central vision, or it's cloudy.
Right, right.
Mhm.
And they do have goggles out there with a wide variety of visual acuities and visual eye conditions that people can do that. And I remember doing a presentation on blindness when I was in my master's program and had a bunch of those, and so I had some of my peers put those on, and they're like, "Holy cow, Darren! I don't even imagine how you're even getting through school on doing this. I don't think I can do that." And I think it's important to recognize you can try these things out and experience, blindness, but just remember you can always take those off. But
That's
those of
right.
us who are blind, we have to deal with it for the rest of our lives.
Yes, that is a key difference. Having put on some of those goggles and things myself, just
Hmm.
for a training demonstration, and I know I felt that. I thought, oh my goodness, this is really hard, and I'm glad Lorraine is here guiding me, and all those things. But I knew at the end of that training that she was doing, I was taking those goggles off and
Hmm.
not. Um,
Yeah, and I think also the other thing with the family member is, I'm always an advocate for independence. If I need to learn how to use a white cane, or in my case, I use a guide dog, and
mhm.
educate the family members how to navigate a blind person using a cane or a guide dog. It's super helpful. I always have to tell my kids, you know, hey, when the harness is on, he's working.
Mhm.
And so my kids have automatically learned, even when my dogs are not working, ask for permission to play with the dogs. So being able to recognize those boundaries, and being able to help family members, where can they walk so the dog can work what they need to do, For me, I had a guide dog who, my guide dogs work on my left side, and it's so cute because I like working with my dog. Then my wife is on my right, I hold her hand, and my dog looking back at both of us and navigating everything to make sure we
Yeah.
both can squeeze through without issues. It was probably the coolest thing I've ever seen. So I've had to advocate, for loved ones to say, hey, this is what's going to happen. Don't tell me there's a curb coming. Let the dog do his work. And that's another piece of not trying to intervene too much.
Mm-hmm.
Is we've had to learn to trust the dogs, and so family members need to learn to trust the dogs when we're walking around as well.
As well. And communicating what you still need with the dog. I guess
Yes.
myself being on the opposite side of that, sometimes I know several people with dogs, guide dogs, and they're super independent, but that doesn't mean that they might still want to take an elbow at times or to navigate through something. And just being aware of that and being mindful to ask and say, are you good? Or do you want, would it be helpful to have an elbow?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then the blind person can position the dog to follow rather than to lead when a sighted person takes over when you use sighted guide, which is what you're describing as taking the elbow. That's a sighted guide position, and having the dog, follow behind you.
Right. Just all those subtle things. And again, communication.
Mhm.
And I think some of those resources you shared where family members can learn about Braille or learn about different things, that's helpful too, because I've had people tell me it can be quite burdensome to constantly feel like you're having to educate and train people about your blindness. And so having some resources that folks can follow up on their own, I'm sure could be very helpful.
It is. I would agree. It can get cumbersome, and maybe one of the things you can do with your own families is who in your family can you identify as your biggest ally, and then the two of you work to educate the rest of the family members. Does that make sense?
It does.
And maybe that's where you start. Then it doesn't feel so overwhelming to continue to educate the family members because you have at least one ally who is closer to understanding what's going on, and they can help you navigate this as well, so you don't have to do it so much alone.
Right. And just to build a support network.
Yeah,
which might be family or it might not be family. It might be other friends or professionals.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times it could be a close friend, and they can see how you interact with that person. Then your family members, could learn from that as well. So, yeah, absolutely. I think for the blind person is actually figure out, like you said, is who is that support system, and what is it that they can do to help you achieve your goals, especially when working with family members.
And do you see the importance of connecting with a blind and low vision community? Certainly not exclusively, but having that connection. Sometimes I've had folks say, I've never, I hadn't met another blind person. I was out in a rural area, and then I found a group, whether it's online or in person, that was really helpful.
Yeah, because I think, when you connect to somebody else, no matter what it is like, oh, this is how they make it work for you. Maybe I can take that and adapt it to what will work for me. I think always brilliant to connect with somebody else. Absolutely.
And towards the beginning of our conversation, you touched on mental health support, both for advocates and for their loved ones. Do you have other comments about the importance of mental health and the advocacy process?
I think a lot is, with that, especially with somebody who's losing vision, that can be very anxiety producing and depression producing. I've experienced both of those, growing up, even as an early young adult, and and being able to be, as a family or an individual, to be able to talk about what's going on, and so you're not holding it in, and being able to express those things, because our perception is our reality, but perhaps we need to adapt what our perception is. There's it can be really daunting, to be blind and be stuck and feel like you can't engage, because we're human beings, and we're social beings, and so when we're feel like we can't connect to family, especially family, it's so isolating. So being able to address that, and family members to be able to understand how that isolation impacts daily living, I think it's going to be super helpful.
Well, thank you, Darran, just for sharing some of your own experiences, the importance of communication, the importance of kind of putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Do you have any additional or final advice to families that are starting on their advocacy journey?
I would probably say, get on Google, find some sort of organization, whether it's American Council for the Blind, NFB, and just connect with some of those things. I know one thing that was super helpful for my wife was she got connected to a Facebook page that is for spousal supports of blind individuals. That's been super helpful for her to be able to express in a safe place of some of the struggles that spouses might have as a blind, to blind people, and vice versa. I managed to, find a Facebook page for me to connect with other blind counselors, therapists, and the like, and so those are huge resources to start out with. So yeah, I mean, we live in such a high digital tech environment, especially with the social media, that we can probably connect and find groups of anything that can connect, that can support you in advocacy.
Well, again, Darran, thank you for joining us and sharing all of your insights. Certainly, family advocacy is so important within your family, whether it's your biological family, chosen family, but to have that network around you as well. Any comments you have, you can always reach out to us at contact@aftersight.org. And you can seek out other resources as well on our website, which is aftersight.org. So thank you so much. And I hope that this episode has helped you to navigate your life with vision loss.